En todos esos años quedan los dos solos, la relación es constante. Y son muy frecuentes la proyección de la imagen de Federico en la pintura y los dibujos de Dalí. Es el mismo Federico y la sombra de Federico, que eso nos permite identificar las muchas otras ocasiones en que aparece una sombra de rostro, de estructura cuadrada, que es la de Federico. Sí. Ahora bien, yo quiero llamar la atención sobre el hecho de que está con los ojos cerrados. Sí. Duerme, está muerto, por una cosa que cuenta Dalí que es muy interesante en la residencia. Dice que Federico, al irse a acostar cada noche, antes a los amigos les representaba su muerte y su entierro en Granada. Iba explicando que moría en la cama, que lo desnudaban, que le ponían el sudario, que lo metían en el ataúd, y todos ellos aterrorizados, porque claro, es que él narraba, era un actor extraordinario. Y cuando los tenía bien aterrorizados, daba un salto de alegría, reía y se iba y dormía como un santo. Sí, sí. Porque había descargado en los demás el terror a la muerte. Claro, se había liberado pasando. Y esto es lo que pinta siempre Salvador Dalí. La descarga a través del sueño de la muerte, de la obsesión de la muerte, que es, por lo visto, a lo que se ve una obsesión muy española.
No doubt that Buñuel was responsible for weaning Dalí away from Lorca. Dalí was very beautiful. Lorca was fascinated by him. And when Dalí saw that Lorca wanted to make love to him physically, Dalí became terrified because Dalí, it seems, couldn't accept his own homosexual tendencies. Buñuel was also a very complex character. Buñuel had problems about his own sexuality. He had what one could call a pathetic virility complex, constantly bragging about his conquests and his performance in the leading brothels of Madrid. And they had this tremendously deep relationship, which involved jealousy. Un chien andalou, an Andalusian dog, was made in 1929. This was at a point when Dalí had moved to Paris, and Buñuel was constantly criticizing Lorca in letters to other friends. Lorca himself believed that Dalí and Buñuel had him very much to the forefront of their minds when they made the film, and said to somebody in America, you know, Buñuel and Dalí have made a little shit of a film, which I appear.
It's June 1929. I'm leaving Granada for Madrid, and from there to Paris, London, and then to New York. New York seems horrible, but for that very reason I'm going there. I am very well, with a new restlessness about the world and my future. The two elements that first strike the traveler in the big city are extra-human architecture and furious rhythm, geometry and anguish. The terrible, cold, cruel part is Wall Street. Rivers of gold flow from all over the earth, and death comes with it. There, as nowhere else, you feel a total absence of the spirit. I was lucky enough to see with my own eyes the recent crash where they lost various billions of dollars, a rabble of dead money that slid into the sea. And never as then, amid suicides, hysteria, and groups of fainters, have I felt the sensation of real death. Death without hope, death that is nothing but rottenness, for the spectacle was terrifying, but devoid of greatness.
He went because he knew that if he didn't get out of Spain at that moment, he wouldn't write the great poetry he wanted to write, which was a poetry more concerned with contemporary reality. Also, he was going through a period of depression because of some unhappy personal relationships.
Todos los días se matan en New York 4 millones de patos, 5 millones de cerdos, 2.000 palomas para el gusto de los agonizantes, 1 millón de vacas, 1 millón de corderos y 2 millones de gallos que dejan los cielos hechos añicos. Yo denuncio a toda la gente que ignora la otra mitad, la mitad irredimible que levanta sus montes de cementos, donde laten los corazones de los animalitos que se olvidan y donde caeremos todos en la última fiesta de los taladros. No, 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 yo denuncio la conjura de estas desiertas oficinas que no radian las agonías, que borran los programas de la selva, y me ofrezco a ser comido por las vacas estrujadas cuando sus gritos llenan el valle donde el Hudson se emborracha con aceite.
To Philip Cummings, July 6, 1929. My dear friend, I was overjoyed to receive your letter. I've found a place in New York. I've registered at Columbia University, and for this reason, I can't be with you until 6 weeks from now.
Oh, did you, by the way, notice this? This was my permit to go into the Royal Palace grounds when I was living in Spain under that fellowship. I loved that. I could go everywhere. In fact, I walked with the Pope there, but not the present one, 2 or 3 popes ago. This is the only book I have of the ones I used to have several of that Lorca gave me when he was here and in his lifetime and in Eden.
Oh, that's beautiful. This is his Romancero Gitano, his gypsy ballads. Can I read it? A mi queridísimo amigo Felipe, my dear friend Felipe, con un abrazo estrecho, a firm embrace de su siempre amigo, his friend of always, Federico, 1929. Oh, that's beautiful, and that's the only book you've got still with...
I have 3 or 4, but the others were borrowed, purloined, or otherwise. They disappeared.
They disappeared.
I more or less know where they are, but somebody loves them.
That's beautiful. Well, I'm very envious of you.
I want to take you a record, but I have to go to another room to play the record because it's 78, of course.
Where is it, in here?
Yes, I'll get it.
I'll just get out of your way for a second.
One side is a little bit scratched, but it's a very old record, of course.
This is the record with Lorca playing the piano.
Yes, and Antonita singing. It's approximately 55 years old, of course. I met him first one day in the Presidente de Estudiantes of Piña 21, when after lunch he would go to the sala. Nobody went into the sala. They all went to have a rest, a siesta. He was in there playing, and I was so excited. I went in, sat down, and I grinned at him, and he nodded at me, and that was it.
But he has a marvelous control.
He has a beautiful control.
Yes.
And she does the castanets better than she does the singing. I found my old passport. That's my 1926 picture. So when he came to me, my father couldn't speak a word of Spanish to him, and he couldn't speak English, but we grinned and got into the Model T and drove up to Lake Eden. And he just was so glad to see the country. The country said, sin casas, no houses.
No houses.
No people, nothing.
Lorca is very formally dressed, isn't he, compared to you? Didn't he bring any more sort of loose-fitting?
Not much, just the sweater.
It's very much an English jersey, isn't it? But definitely bought in Oxford.
Oh, definitely. Very handsome.
And he obviously took to your mother very quickly.
She got along very well
him.
together.
Yeah.
But they met over the common donut pail. She made him fresh donuts and he loved them. He said he was going to bring me a poem, a book of poems. He brought it.
Mm-hmm.
I said, Federico, it's wonderful. They've got to be put into English. She said, I can't. She said, you do it. Well, my father had an old Oliver typewriter, and I sat down and went to work on it. I still type with 2 fingers ineffectively. But we would argue. We'd argue right after breakfast, maybe with a big pot of tea or coffee or something. and we would argue about it. While he wouldn't understand the exact English word, he knew the nuance, and I would translate what I thought of it. We had some quite fierce arguments for a while, and then we would come to what he thought and I thought was a satisfactory result. That's why the Canciones means so much to me, because it's a book which was published after we had translated it, right with the poet sitting there.
Cuando sale la luna de 100 rostros iguales, la moneda de plata solloza en el bolsillo.
That was very difficult for me to understand at first. And when the moon goes out with 100 equal faces, the money of silver sobs in the pockets, which is fantastic. Because when the moon goes out, it has been obliterated totally with the great clouds, and everything now has become complete darkness, a velouté, the French would say, a velvety darkness. Then everything looks alike. All the sounds are muffled into one common sound.
Yeah, and the next verse is tremendous. There's
when the moon
image
goes
of
out, the sea covers the earth. The heart feels itself an island in infinity.
The landscape of Vermont is marvelous, but infinitely melancholy. It never stops raining. The family is very nice, full of gentle charm, but the woods and lakes immerse me in an almost unbearable state of poetic despair.
He was so impressed with the deep stillness of it. He always said to me, "Mi duende tiene siempre el agua." My fate has water in it. The bird is now a protected bird. It's very much of a haunted cry, but it's a lonely cry. And the loneliness of the loon reached right to him very clearly, because he was feeling lonely about many things. I never could quite encompass all the things he was lonely about.
When he came to see you, he had already begun to write some poems of Negro inspiration. The King of Harlem had already been written, so he did, in a sense, find a subject before he came to Vermont.
Well, I think you have to realize something else is very important about that in Harlem. He was not interested in the Negro question as we have it in America. He was interested in this as a people apart. And he was thinking of those people in Spain, such as you wrote of in the Casa Maria Alba, and all of those, the people who are depressed,
yes,
either pushed down by the Guardia Civilis or oppressed by an over-dominant church. And he was another people who pushed. He felt a kinship.
And he was interested in them as symbols more than as actual.
He was not interested in this, he was not interested in the socialism of it, the political socialism. He was in the compassionate socialism.
Yes.
Human rights, we call it today.
Many mornings I used to walk down from the university where I lived, changing from the frightful Mr. Locker of my professors into the strange sleepy boy of the waitresses. And wanting to find out what they were thinking, I watched the blacks dance, for dance is the most unique and poignant expression of their feelings and pain.
Ay, Harlem, ay, Harlem, ay, Harlem. No hay angustia comparable a tus rojos oprimidos, a tu sangre estremecida dentro del eclipse oscuro, a tu violencia granate sordomuda en la penumbra, a tu gran rey prisionero con un traje de conserje. Es curioso porque una de las grandes sorpresas que indudablemente tuvo Federico al llegar fue el conocimiento, la toma de contacto con el mundo negro. El mundo negro con todo lo que llevaba el mundo negro, ¿no?, consigo. Y que hablaba, dice, los negros lloraban confundidos entre paraguas y soles de oro. Los mulatos estiraban gomas, ansiosos de llegar al torso blanco, y el viento empañaba espejos y quebraba las venas de los bailarines. Negro, 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 negro.
These Cuban newspapers of the period, they showed, don't they, what an incredible impact Lorca made in La Havana.
And there you have Lorca dressed all in white. Like it was very fashionable at that time in Cuba. So.
He said to his parents, "Me estoy poniendo aplatanado." Aplatanado. Is aplatanado a word that is used frequently in Cuba?
Yes, aplatanado means when you really get used to the rhythm and to the climate.
That's right.
You know, and you feel at ease.
At ease.
At ease. That's
ease with yourself and man.
That's how he felt.
Right. All his lectures were covered in the press.
I remember when I was a student, one of the important matters that was given to me was about Cante Hondo, and it was Federico's lecture what they gave us to learn about Cante Hondo.
Oh, really?
Yes. Cante Hondo for us was not only an academic or poetic lecture. Mm-hmm. He was talking to us about something that we had as well,
exactly,
in a different way. In the steps of the rumba, there is a strong influence of the music and the dance of the flamenco. Iré a Santiago, y con el rosa de Romeo y Julieta, iré a Santiago, mar de papel y plata de monedas. Iré a Santiago, oh Cuba, oh ritmo de semillas secas. Iré a Santiago, oh cintura caliente y gota de madera. Iré a Santiago, arpa de troncos vivos, caimán,
flor de tabaco. Flor de tabaco.
Iré a
It's a reference to the cigar boxes.
I think this poem is important because in the 1930s, very few Cuban poets and Cuban writers would really be aware of the importance, of the African presence in Cuba. Only big talents like Nicolas Guillén, our national poet. That is why I think Nicolas and Federico, although Federico was not a Cuban, they go together on the same road, you see, opening the way of reality, of the Cuban identity. Iré a Santiago, brisa y alcohol en las ruedas. Iré a Santiago, mi coral en la tiniebla. Iré a Santiago, el mar ahogado en la arena. Iré a Santiago, calor blanco, fruta muerta. Iré a Santiago, oh bovino frescor de cañavera. Oh Cuba, oh curva de suspiro y barro. Iré a Santiago. It's absolutely...
It's wonderful. And of course, I know that Lorca, when he was a child, used to sing habaneras, that his aunt or cousins used to sing these songs. So I think he always wanted to go to Cuba. I think that Cuba was a dream for Lorca, who was, of course, born in the very year of the Cuban War.
I think it is true that if we want to find Lorca, we will have to go either to Andalusia or to Cuba. I think he was right.
Yes.
Spain is always moved by the duende, being a country of ancient music and dance. We are also a nation of death, a nation open to death. In every country, death has finality. It arrives and the blinds are drawn. Not in Spain. In Spain, they are lifted. Many Spaniards live between walls until the day they die, when they are taken out into the sun. A dead person in Spain is more alive when dead than is the case anywhere else. His profile cuts like the edge of a barber's razor.
Por las gradas subí Ignacio con toda su muerte a cuestas. Buscaba su hermoso cuerpo y encontró su sangre abierta.
It is in bullfighting that the duende attains its most impressive character, because on the one hand, it has to fight with death, which may bring destruction, and on the other, with geometry, the fundamental basic measure of the spectacle. The bull has its orbit, the bullfighter his, and between orbit and orbit, there exists a point of danger where lies the apex of the terrible game.
I don't think he was a great bullfight man, a great aficionado. I think he was more interested in the mythology of bullfighting, the roots of the ceremony. I think that's what really gripped his imagination. He was horrified when his great friend Ignacio Sanchez Mejías was gored to death in 1934. Sanchez Mejías loved poetry and flamenco. And he was the only bullfighter ever to write a play about psychoanalysis. And out of his grief for his lost friend came one of Lorca's greatest poems.
Y el toro solo, corazón, a las 5 de la tarde. Cuando el sudor de nieve fue llegando a las 5 de la tarde. Cuando la plaza se cubrió de yodo a las 5 de la tarde. La muerte puso huevos en la herida a las 5 de la tarde.
Everything that could go wrong went wrong. And Lorca came to believe that Ignacio died by an act of fate. The bull who killed him, and when Lorca discovered this, it came as a great shock, was called Granadino, from Granada.
Si muero, dejad el balcón abierto. El niño come naranjas. Desde mi balcón lo veo. Si muero, dejad el balcón abierto.
If I die, leave the shutters open. I'm sure he was referring to the shutters of this bedroom. I find it very difficult to imagine what it was like that day at the beginning of August, once the Spanish Civil War had begun, and a group of thugs arrived here in the garden. They came down this path, they arrived here, they knocked on the door. They were extremely violent, and they hauled the whole family out here onto the terrace. And they were looking for the brothers of the caretaker. And they got hold of the caretaker and they tied him to a cherry tree, which was situated more or less where that indolent dog is lying now. And they tied him to the cherry tree and they stripped him to the waist. He was called Gabriel. And they whipped him until he bled, screaming. And Lorca at that point rushed out and protested and went up to the sergeant and said, "How dare you do this in this house? Who are you? What permission have you got to come here?" And they kicked Lorca to the ground and they called him a filthy homosexual. And that evening, Lorca became aware that now they knew he was in the Huerta and that he was in danger. And so he rang his friend, Luis Rosales, a young Falangist poet, and begged him to come and talk to him and perhaps to take him to his house to protect him. And that very evening, Rosales came and took Lorca away. And Lorca left the Huerta de San Vicente, never to return. De modo que cuando Lorca sale de vuestra casa para ir a su muerte, pasando por este cuadro, porque unos pocos días después le asesinan y se acabó para siempre la labor creativa de García Lorca.
Sí, yo creo además que nadie puede saber lo que se ha perdido con él, porque él estaba entonces en su momento de creación suma. A mí Lorca estaba en la plenitud de sus facultades a los 38 años.
He was taken from Luis Rosales' house in the early afternoon of the 16th of August, and he was taken in a car to the civil government building. A very short distance, some 300 yards. And it's almost certain that he spent 2.5 days in the civil government. Manuel de Falla tried to intervene on his behalf, but arrived too late. The Rosales family tried to intervene on his behalf, but apparently could do nothing. It seems that the civil governor got into contact with Seville, with the General Queipo de Llano, to ask what he should do with Lorca, because obviously he knew that Lorca was a famous poet, and that there'd be a tremendous reaction to his death. And it seems that General Queipo de Llano said yes, give him coffee, lots of coffee, was his little formula, his little way of saying, kill him.
El otoño vendrá con caracolas, uva de nieblas y montes agrupados. Pero nadie querrá mirar tus ojos porque te has muerto para siempre. Porque te has muerto para siempre, como todos los muertos de la tierra. Como todos los muertos que se olvidan en un montón de perros apagados. No te conoce nadie.
Cuando se hundieron las formas puras, bajo el cri-cri de las margaritas, comprendí que me habían asesinado. Recorrieron los cafés y los cementerios y las iglesias. Abrieron los toneles y los armarios. Destrozaron 3 esqueletos para arrancar sus dientes de oro. Ya no me encontraron. No me encontraron.
I was quite overcome, actually, thinking about Lorca and how he had traveled along this very road in a car, probably sensing that something dreadful was going to happen to him. We don't know if he knew he was going to be shot, but Lorca had this feeling for death. We've got to imagine that this was very dark. It would have been 2 or 3 in the morning.
Vamos a callarnos. Yo sabré llevar mi cruz como mejor pueda, pero no me preguntes nada. Si pudiera de pronto volverme vieja y tuviera la boca como una flor machacada, te podría sonreír y conllevar la vida contigo. Ahora déjame con mis clavos.
Lorca was greatly hated, you know, by the right wing in Granada. They disliked his work, particularly the play Yerma, which seemed to them to be an attack on traditionalist Catholic values. Also, he had the wrong friends. He was homosexual. And they didn't like his father either, because his father was a rich landowner who was very good to the people working on his farms. Helped them, built houses for them, very generous man. And I think that they also wanted to punish the father by killing the son. I think in those circumstances, in those days when people were either right or left, the issue seemed very clear-cut. Lorca was anti-fascist, and he had sided with the Popular Front government, although he was never a member of a political party. The car pulled into the little square of Beithnar and stopped in front of the gates to the palace built here in the 18th century. And at the beginning of the war, it became Falangist headquarters for this area of the province.
La noche se puso íntima como una pequeña plaza. Guardias civiles borrachos en la puerta golpeaban. Verde, que te quiero, verde. Verde viento, verde rama. El barco sobre la mar y el caballo en la montaña.
Lorca was taken across the valley out there to his death from the Colonia. All that remains of the building, the tiled floor of the room where Lorca spent those last few hours. Hundreds of people came here to their death. According to that guard to whom I've spoken, when Lorca realized that he was going to be shot, he leapt to his feet and screamed, you know, I'm innocent, I've done nothing, I'm a Catholic. And then he asked to be confessed, and the priest had gone. And this guard, who was very Catholic, helped him to pray. And then apparently he became rather calm and entertained the other people who were in that room. The lame, the one-legged school teacher and the 2 bullfighters, and apparently he went calmly to his death.
A las 5 de la tarde. Lo demás era muerte y solo muerte. A las 5 de la tarde.
Lorca's work is full of streams and water, and it's ironic that he spent his last few hours listening to this stream. A stream that flows out of a nearby spring called the Fuente Grande. The bubbles rise continually to the surface. And 800 years ago, the Arabs called it Aina Damar, which means the fountain of tears.
Los caballos negros son.
Las herraduras son negras.
Sobre las capas relucen manchas de tinta y de cera.
Tienen. Por eso no lloran de plomo las calaveras.
Con el alma de charol vienen por la carretera, jorobados y nocturnos, por donde animan, ordenan silencios de goma oscura y miedos de fina arena.
Pasan, si quieren pasar.
Y ocultan en la cabeza una vaga astronomía de pistolas inconcretas.
¡Oh, ciudad de los gitanos!
En las esquinas banderas.
La luna y la calabaza con las guindas en conserva.
¡Oh, ciudad de los gitanos!
¿Quién te vio y no te recuerda?
Ciudad de dolor y almizcle con las torres de canela.
The first thing I did in my life when I got my first mini cassette was to take a cassette
Of the records.
of that record.
Playing, accompanying La Argentinita.
La Argentinita. And you can hear Federico's voice sometimes.
Can you?
Yeah, there's a moment when he says something like, oh, like that.
I haven't heard that.
You haven't heard that?
That's the imagination of
No.
a crazy Lorca scholar.
You think so?
Everybody says that he gave himself fully to the friendship of the moment.
He has many friends also who never met him, because
That's
we
true.
never met him and we love him. We could have been, perhaps, very good friends of him.
Yes.
I'm sure I could have been a very close friend to Lorca. And you too?
Yes, I'm not so sure about myself.
No?
No, I think you
No.
would have found me a bit...
Academic?
A bit academic,
Oh,
perhaps,
no,
and a bit
come on.
rough. A bit Irish.
Well,